And Caitlin and Marie from Literacy Network will be hosting our training today. I'm really excited for them to show just the great digital literacy tools they've developed. If you've got questions throughout, questions or comments, please type them in the chat box. I will be monitoring the chat box, and if I see comments and questions, I will let Caitlin and Marie know, and we can address those throughout. Let's see, I think that's about it. So I will let Caitlin take over.
Hi, Beth. Thank you very much. Thank you for.
Sorry, Caitlin. I'm sorry. 1 second. Sorry. That was not. Let's see. Oh. Okay, right. Caitlin, can you talk now?
I think so.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes. All right, great.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Beth, for the warm welcome and for having us. We're really excited to talk today about digital literacy and some of the materials and frameworks that we've developed for our program. We think they'll be pretty adaptable for programs in different areas of the state. My name is Caitlin Mackesy. I'm the Director of Public Group Instruction at Literacy Network, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Marie Simpson, and she's an ESL instructor with us who did much of the development of the curriculum we're following. So I'm going to lead us off with a few notes about today's presentation, and then Marie will take over for me, and we'll go from there. Today we're talking about digital literacy, and this has become kind of a pressing issue for all of us. A lot of programs have moved to online in the recent weeks. There's been a lot of resources out there for taking classes online during Safer at Home. This presentation is really not aimed to address those sort of short-term needs. It's more of a presentation about what we would like our digital literacy programs to look like in the best of circumstances when we're able to run face-to-face programs the way that we designed them and intended to run them in our organizations. So this one's a little bit more about teaching digital skills and a little bit less about bringing things online. So I just wanted to make that note before we begin. And now I'll have Marie take it away.
Hi, thank you, Beth. Thank you, Caitlin, for the introduction, and thank you, everybody. As Caitlin said, I'm Marie Simpson. I'm the lead instructor at Literacy Network, and I'm excited to share with you our process for developing our digital literacy program. So I'm going to start out today with giving you an idea of what to look forward to in our presentation. We're going to start out by sharing with you best practices for adult learners, and then we'll move into things to consider when creating benchmarks that make sense for your learners and your organization, and how you can integrate digital literacy into your existing curriculum or textbook. And we'll end on a collaborative note today with opportunities for discussion, brainstorming, and resource sharing. Let's dive in. Okay, let's start with a discussion today of where your organization currently stands with digital literacy. So we're going to discuss a couple of questions, and then of course you can put your comments into the comment bar, and Beth will moderate that. So the first question is, what digital literacy options do you typically offer in your programs or at your organization? And what challenges have you had implementing digital literacy in the past?
All right, so if you want to enter into the chat, I can read some of the messages out loud. Okay, so digital literacy depends completely on the willingness and comfort, and maybe that's of tutors and learners. Also, if anybody would like to, some folks are saying we're not using any digital literacy currently.
Okay, that's great to know. Absolutely.
Anybody also, you can raise your hand if you'd like to answer verbally, whatever is most comfortable for folks. Yeah, but just saying that some of the challenges are comfort and willingness of tutors.
Absolutely. And we've definitely found that there's, it's an adjustment, not even just for our learners, but for tutors, instructors, program managers. There's definitely a learning curve all around to implementing digital literacy into your programs. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, we've got a couple comments and I see a hand raised, so I'll just read the comments. All ELL and GED classes use Computer Lab for 30 minutes to an hour each week, completing a variety of tasks based on the curriculum. And then someone else says we have a computer lab that we require each class use at least weekly. It's used in a wide variety of ways according to the instructor. Challenges include students who don't see the use of computer lab as advancing their English learning goals and therefore don't want to participate. And let's see, someone had their hand up, but maybe took it down. But we've got another chat. Here someone is saying technology is used in the classroom as a tool to learn about the topic being taught. So this could be a tablet, a computer, or a tablet that students bring.
Okay, absolutely, yeah. And we'll kind of touch base on a lot of these, but it's good to see where people are and where it sounds like we have a variety of experience from people not doing any of this at all at the present to people being in there weekly and using it for everything. So that's excellent. Thank you all for sharing. Let's get into best practices then. All right, so in the past couple of semesters that we have been piloting this program, we have identified a few key best practices in implementing digital literacy into our curriculum. Starting out, it's great to feel out how much exposure or experience your learners already have with computers. This can be as formal or informal as you want it to be. I typically do it pretty informally in my classes through short surveys or discussion questions with the greater group or in small groups. And I have found the informal surveys and discussions work really well in all levels of my classes. And these, for example, I might poll students and say, raise your hand if you use the computer often. Raise your hand if you never use the computer. And this information comes in handy for a variety of reasons. In particular, I always try to, when we are doing hands-on activities on the computer, I always try to put students into pairs or small groups. And I try to make sure that each pair or small group has at least one more experienced learner who uses the computer more often, paired with less experienced learners. And this will also, of course, help you plan at what level you will need to start your lessons. So, for example, if most of your learners use the computer often or even sometimes, you probably don't need to spend a whole lesson going over basic mouse usage. Another best practice we've identified is related to how you use your class time, make sure that the setup works for your learner's computer experience level. And for this, it's important to consider what your objective is for the class period before setting up, because you don't want to waste class time on time-consuming things that aren't related to the objective. So, for example, if I have a class of students who maybe don't have as much experience using computers on a regular basis, I will try to have the computers already on and logged in with the web page that we're using already up when they walk in the classroom. And this cuts down on class time spent struggling to get everyone on the same page. It's important because in this situation, there's both a tech barrier and a language barrier. And, getting set up and where we need to be right away, it makes it so that we can spend more time working on our objective for the day. And of course, if your objective is related to signing in or navigating to a web page, I would not have this computer set up for them, but it depends on what your focus for that class is. Another best practice is to think about ways learners can get practice outside of class. This really depends not only on the resources of your organization, but on the resources of your students. And as people mentioned before, the motivation level of your students, if they have that buy-in. One thing that we encourage instructors to do at our organization is to reserve the lab outside of class time, if possible, so that students have the opportunity for independent practice with supervision. It's great for students who don't have a computer at home or access to the internet. And it's also great for students who are less confident because they can use the computer outside of the normal class period, but the teacher is there to answer questions. So if this is a possibility for your programs, for your instructors, I highly recommend it. Another thing to consider is choosing platforms that are accessible from home for students who have access to tech at home. So for example, students can use Google Drive in class and at home if they have a Google account. We will talk about other online resources and platforms at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for that, please hold them until that portion of the presentation. And finally, the last best practice that we've identified is to focus on one small objective at a time and break it down into even smaller parts. This one seems really obvious, but it's deceptively tricky. Many seemingly simple digital skills are actually composed of many, many smaller skills. For example, completing a web search, learners need to be able to identify parts of a web page, like the address bar if they're going to enter a web address. Or they need to know how to connect to the internet. They need to know how to identify, what is a link? What can I click on? What shouldn't I click on? It really pays to spend some time going through a given objective before or as you're planning and asking yourself, can my students do this already? For every little part, no matter how little it might seem to you. My advice to you going forward is to spend a few class periods on any given objective. Get students familiar with the terminology and purpose of the objective before you even sit down in front of the computer. All right.
All right. So next we'll talk a little bit about how Marie and I structure digital literacy for our program. We'll be talking mostly about our ESL group classes program, which has implemented digital literacy in levels 2 through 4. But I do want to note that we think a lot of what we have is pretty adaptable to most programs. So when we set out to do this for our classes, we had some considerations that we discussed together. So we wanted to make sure that the digital literacy that we offered was relevant to our students' goals and feedback we had gotten from students. We wanted to take into account the ability level of our students with our benchmarks, state standards, our organizational resources, and we wanted to make sure we had really clear structures in place for teachers and volunteers. So for student goals and feedback, you heard Marie talk about how she does informal surveys in class. We were also really fortunate that we had data from student intake when we do personalized education plans with students as they enter our organization. We ask if they're interested in learning computer skills, and if they say yes, we survey them on what types of skills they want to learn. So we had a pretty solid idea of what topics were most interesting for students. We did our best to consider their ability level going in, knowing that for our program, students were sorted into levels based on their English skills rather than their computer skills. So we knew we'd have a wide range in our classes, but we looked at the state standards and we decided what did we think would be reasonable for students to achieve in a semester of class. We also elected not to offer digital literacy for our basic and level 1 students because we knew that we needed the time in the semester to focus on those English skills. We're hoping that down the road, as we get more comfortable teaching digital literacy and we learn more tricks, we'll be able to implement digital literacy at a very basic level for students in level 1 and our basic classes. Finally, we considered our organizational resources. We have at Literacy Network 1 computer lab with about 10 computers and about 12 student laptops. Most of our classes have 20 students or so. So we knew that we would need pretty much all of our resources to be able to serve a class. So we knew that we'd have to be strategic about using that lab and the laptop cart. And then the most important thing we thought was making sure that we had a clear structure in place for everyone, since we would all be jumping into this at the same time. We wanted to make sure we had consistent training and good processes for sharing those resources that we have. So from that, we developed a checklist for training. We knew that we wanted digital literacy benchmarks by curriculum level because we couldn't in our program design them by computer level. We needed them by ESL level. We knew that we wanted guidelines for completing benchmarks so that our instructors would have a roadmap to follow. So from that, we decided to develop some sample materials. So we had a scope and sequence that highlights digital opportunities, and we think of them as opportunities because we want to point out good places where instructors can inject digital skills into their regular curriculum, but we know that some instructors will really appreciate the flexibility to develop something new for their group. So we wanted to have a model there for people to use as inspiration, but also make sure that nothing was so set in stone that teachers couldn't get creative based on their classes' needs and goals. We also developed a sample digital literacy unit so that instructors could see what this looked like when it all came together. We made sure to get login and password information for instructional use out to those instructors early and often. It's something that you'll share more times than you expect. And we needed a clear process for reserving lab time and student laptops since we have quite a few classes that overlap in their schedule. We knew we would need a process for reserving that out ahead of time. So this is a quick screenshot of what our digital literacy benchmarks look like, how that document is organized for us. I'm going to send this to Beth so that you can have a Word document copy of it yourself so you can modify it for your own programs. As I said, this is based on our ESL classes, but you could very easily adapt it to ABE. You'll see in this document a lot of those considerations that we mentioned a few slides back, some clear instructions for how to follow these objectives and what makes a digital literacy unit complete. So we also have some clear leveling. So in level 2 ESL, It takes about 2 competencies to complete an objective. In level 3, we're asking students to do 3 or 4 competencies in a single objective. This goes up to level 4, where you'll see 4 or 5 competencies per objective. You'll notice that there's review from level to level. So for level 2, a state standard was completing a basic web search. In that, we've broken it down into internet safety, especially what not to click, and accessing information from multiple sources. Unfortunately, I can't get the full document up right now, but you'll see that internet safety competency repeated in levels 3 and level 4, because we know that's something we want to hit on every time that we're using the internet with students, especially since some students might enter your program at level 3 or level 4. They didn't receive any internet safety information back in level 2 if they didn't take the class. So you'll see there's repetition, and that these objectives gradually get more complex as you go on through the different levels. We wanted to talk with our instructors specifically about what does it mean to complete one objective per semester. For us, that's completing the competencies, and then also organizing a capstone activity for students. A capstone activity is a real world activity that's communicative, that's using their language skills to use digital skills in a really real world type of way. So for completing a web search, that could be for one group that I had, it was actually higher than level 2. We were analyzing information and from multiple sources in a table. So it was using the web to search for information about different career programs. It was a transitions level group, so they're hoping to go on to Madison College. So they were looking up different career and education programs, putting information about them in a table, and then a couple sentence summary at the end, what they learned and what program was most interesting to them. So tying this back into the real world, trying to encourage students to use their language skills as much as possible. So they still feel that they're getting that speaking or writing practice in the class. And then we also needed really specific processes for instructors for how to coordinate lab time, because I think 3 of the 4 classes that would be using computers all met on Wednesday nights. So we reminded teachers that some objectives might be completed in one class period, but that others would take a full unit or even a semester to complete. So thinking about which competencies require time in the computer lab and which competencies can be tackled outside of the computer lab, reserving that time well in advance, and then coordinating with the other instructors who teach on Wednesday nights to reserve the lab. And now Marie is gonna take us through some of the models that we used to show instructors what this could look like integrated into the curriculum that they already used in their classes.
Thank you, Caitlin. So you can see here an example of a scope and sequence that we include in the instructor training that Caitlin mentioned earlier. We've included suggestions in this document for digital literacy objectives that would be appropriate for each unit of the textbook. We use ventures. So this is following the ventures sequencing. We make this document available to instructors for inspiration rather than as a set in stone curriculum. We want to provide a framework for instructors to work within, but to provide consistency for learners, but we also want instructors to have the flexibility to adapt it to their class's particular needs. So here we are looking at the level 3 curriculum, and you can see that we have the grammar concepts and application activities in the black print. And in bold green letters is where we have put some ideas for what digital literacy objectives could go well with that particular unit. So we're going to take a look at we're going to zoom in and take a look at a sample unit in the next slide here. So this is for Ventures 3, that's our ESL Level 3 class. And in this example, we're following Unit 4, which is the health curriculum, or the health unit of Ventures. In bold at the bottom of the unit, I've identified a digital literacy objective that I think fits the unit well, which is completing a web search. Of course, there are other objectives and competencies that you could use for this unit, but I chose this one because it fits well into the writing lesson in the book for this Ventures unit. And also because, for better or worse, it is very common for people to search for health information on the internet. There are 3 competencies that support this objective, and you would find this information in the benchmarks document that Caitlin showed you earlier. So the competencies for completing a web search are internet safety, analyzing information from multiple sources, and organizing information in a table. So you can slowly introduce the objective throughout the unit by introducing digital vocabulary alongside the health topic itself. It doesn't have to be separate from the Ventures unit. It can be woven together. You can discuss internet safety as a class. You can talk about where people get health information. You can start reading and analyzing tables in the book and outside of the book. And you can also practice studying web search results. So for example, for that last one, I might pose a question in Google and then screenshot the search results and have students analyze in small groups which websites might answer my question best. The idea of this is that students are building familiarity with the digital platforms and vocabulary in the classroom, so that when you get to the lab later and sit in front of the computer, they're not surprised by anything. They already know what a web page looks like. They know the vocabulary for it. They know what to click on. They are just putting their knowledge to use in the lab. All right. And next, we're going to do a little bit of group discussion and crowdsourcing. So we've shared what has worked in our organization, but how about yours? How do you think that this could work in your programs? And what ideas do you have for integrating the competencies into your curricula? So please take a moment to share with in the chat section, and Beth will moderate that for us.
And while we're waiting for folks to answer this question, Marie, we do have a question. Just wondering if you've
Sure.
done anything to address the tutor, so digital skills for tutors who, if sometimes learners are more digitally able than the tutors. So I don't know if you address that all in the presentation, or something we could look at this toward the end.
Well, this is mostly, I mean, I've mostly done this in group classes,
Okay.
but I think we have, so in our programs, we have a tutoring class, like a tutoring in our community literacy tutoring session. We have one session that's dedicated to computer skills. And I know, I think that those tutors might go through some extra training. Caitlin, do you want to chime in on that? Do you have an idea of what Molly does with those tutors?
Yeah, I have a little bit of an idea. I was involved in the pilot for that program. I can say that some of it's done on the recruitment end. So making sure that when we recruit tutors to work with learners who've identified a digital literacy as a goal, making sure that those tutors feel really comfortable with pretty typical digital skills. We don't want to scare anyone off if you say digital literacy. Sometimes people think, oh gosh, I don't know how to use all of the like VLOOKUPs in Excel, and that's not what students are learning. So giving some good concrete examples of like, do you know how to check email regularly, search for information on the internet, and compose documents using Microsoft Office. So recruiting folks that way has worked. And then also there would be some additional training for those tutors to help them get an idea of what they can expect typically from students and their skill level.
Excellent. I do want to encourage folks to please answer the questions that Marie put. Okay, I see a couple. Here we go. So answer those in the chat box and I'll read them out loud. Anna, also is the question about tutor training is I think that some agencies have had tutor in services where they walk through, so they have somebody leading the in service and they will walk through some competencies with folks, with tutors, so they can feel more comfortable integrating that into their lessons. So one comment we have is something really simple I do when I have a lower level class and a computer and a monitor in the room is show a picture of an obscure vocabulary word like armoire instead of attempting to explain it. Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've seen a lot of teachers do that in class, and it's a really great moment to show students how they might use a web search just off the cuff on their smartphone in life to look up a word they don't know in English. That's definitely something that we can do in any classroom that has a screen. And I love seeing that happen when I'm in classes.
At Latino Academy, we have specific computer classes and try to incorporate digital skills into the curriculums of our classes. What we have learned from the current situation is that we have to be way more systematic about it. We had a series of digital skills classes programmed for spring break right before the emergency declaration. Now we are seeing the need to be prepared for a situation like the one we're experiencing. We've moved all of our classes online, and there are many levels of digital savviness. And we do have a question from the institutions wondering if this curriculum could be used for Rachel, so the prison-friendly internet. And yes, I think it could. I think that some of the competencies could be adapted.
Absolutely. Yeah, we try to leave it as open and adaptable as possible, and just encourage people to consider, yeah, what are your resources? What are you able to do? Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And that is, I think that's all we're seeing right now. Oh, I have one more. As a tutor with 3 adult learners, I see them using their cell phones for texting, etc. I can evaluate their grammar and vocabulary by communicating with me through texting. Another great way to incorporate digital.
Yes, yeah, and we have had instructors use smartphones, have their students use smartphones in class for activities. I know Kahoot is a popular one that you can use your smartphone for in class. So yeah, definitely don't leave out smartphones, because for some of our students, that's all they've got. That's a great idea. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and I would say we have found at Literacy Network that about 85% of students have smartphones, whereas many fewer have computers at home. So anything that you can do that can be adapted to a smartphone for use at home is really great. Another thing that I've seen in classes is Polls Everywhere, which can be used on a smartphone or even just a regular phone that has texting enabled. So that's another great tool to use in class to check answers on something, or to do a quick poll. It can be a lot of fun. Students like seeing all of the results come up on the screen.
Excellent. That goes to one of our comments. Somebody says we don't have a computer lab currently. Is there a way to use smartphones in class? So that's a really good comment.
Mhm.
We have someone else say, I would love to start using Zoom. I have yet to test the phone interface or get a professional account, but if we could continue to teach online, I would like to get it up and running. And then a question, is there a platform or group that donates hardware like tablets, computers to nonprofit groups? That's a good question. And yes, there is. We had a conversation in one of our Thursday morning coffee breaks about that. So I can, let me look up that information and I'll put that in the chat.
Yeah, I know it depends on your area. Another good place to check what resources are available in your particular county would be everyoneon.org. And you can see, internet options that your students might be able to access at a low cost, as well as where you might be able to get devices for cheap. We've kind of transitioned into some resources already. So I'll ask Marie to give a quick overview of some of our favorites, and then we'll open it up for a final Q&A at the end.
Cool, thank you, Caitlin. So yeah, we would love to share some of our favorite digital learning resources with you. I'll go through these fairly quickly. So the first one here is digitallearn.org. This site provides instructional modules for self-guided learning, and it's geared toward learners. Great for lab use or even classroom use. GCF Learn Free, that's the second one, has instructional modules. In my opinion, it's not very ESL friendly. I think it's more directed towards native speakers or very high level speakers. It is still a good resource though, so use it if you think that is good for your group, your learners. But just a heads up. And then next is Google's Applied Digital Skills. If you've never checked this out, please do. It is amazing. They have a huge array of curricula. It's great for use in the classroom. They have whole lesson plans on just a wide variety of digital literacy topics. Next is integrating digital literacy into EL instruction. This site has research-based resources for instructors. It's not for learners. It is more. It's inspiration for you if you're running out of ideas or if you don't even know where to start with something. They have a lot of great research-based activities and things for you to access. Next is North Star. It is primarily an assessment tool. You can use it to assess your students' digital skills in a particular area. Like if you want to know how well they're able to use Microsoft Word, you can have them go through the Microsoft Word assessment tool. And that'll kind of give you an idea of where folks are. They can be used in an instructional way also, particularly one-on-one. So check it out. It's a great tool. Finally is Typing Club. This is a personal favorite of mine. I love having this activity on tap as a warm-up activity as students are filing in, if you're having a lab day. It's also great for students who finish the main activity early and they need something to do. Students love it. It's a lot of fun. It's also great because students can use this to practice at home. They can create an account if they'd like to, but you also, the beautiful thing about this is you don't have to create an account. Students or instructors can just make a note of where they left off, and then they can manually choose the level that they last finished and pick up where they left off. So yeah, those are kind of some of our ideas. And what are your favorite tools and content? Please please feel free to share in the chat feature if you have anything you'd like to put out there to everyone.
And then we don't want to take up extra time because it looks like we're getting close to that 10:45 mark. So while folks are entering things in the chat, Beth, if you can call out those favorites, we'd appreciate it. And then if you have any other questions about the presentation, Marie and I will be happy to take questions at this time also. I just wanted to say thank you all for coming out and taking time out of your day to listen. I'll be sending Beth our digital literacy benchmarks document, as well as a sample scope and sequence for levels 2 and 3 of the ventures text. So she'll send that on to everyone. I'm going to be sending Microsoft Word documents so that you can edit them and use them in your programs as appropriate. But for now, what questions or what resources would you like to share with the group?
So we have, let's see, ctep.weebly.com is one from COABE.
Okay.
Has anybody else used that? So learned about it a few years back at the COABE conference. Excellent.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
All right. Oh, so it sounds like the Weebly.com, it's got simple pictures and stuff, so resources like that. Excellent, thank you. Anybody else want to share any? Oh, here we've got, oops, sorry here, my chat froze. Okay, so I've been exploring breaking news English more, and it's awesome. Some of you already know about this. It's not really about how to use the web, but it contains a lot of practice with various tools. Excellent.
We love Breaking English. We've been using that a lot with our distance learning modules right now. So yeah, definitely. Thank you for bringing that up. If anyone hasn't used that yet, it's an awesome tool.
I also really love, on that note, Voice of America, which is more of a radio-based news website. Lots of times listening skills can be hard to work on in a distance context, so I really like having the radio option for students to listen to.
Excellent. And then just messages saying thank you, Caitlin and Marie. This has been very helpful.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Marie and Caitlin, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody that logged on. And if you are in it for gonna join on, we've got at 11 o'clock our Teaching Adults Soft Skills and Communication for Work with Trevor from Forward Services Corporation. So thank you, everybody, and I hope to see you again at more of our webinars throughout the day.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.